The night pressed down on me like a held breath, the kind that makes your chest ache before you even realize you are afraid. Rain streaked the windows of the old guest house, turning the city lights outside into trembling veins of gold, and I remember thinking that this was how my life felt at that moment, blurred, uncertain, stretched thin by circumstances I never planned. I had come here with nothing but a small bag, a tired heart, and the stubborn hope that tomorrow might be kinder than yesterday, and I did not know that this night, in a room too small for distance, would quietly change the direction of everything. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the idea that small moments can transform entire lives, take a second right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel, The Kindness Chronicles, so stories like this can keep reaching hearts that are still learning how to heal. I had met her earlier that evening under circumstances that felt accidental, but later revealed themselves as necessary. A delayed bus, a missed connection, and a storm that refused to calm had pushed both of us into the same aging guest house on the edge of the city. The place smelled faintly of damp wood and old paint, and the narrow hallways carried every sound as if they wanted witnesses. We were strangers bound by inconvenience, two tired souls looking for shelter rather than connection. I was carrying the weight of a recent failure that still burned in my chest, the kind that leaves you questioning your worth, your choices, and whether you are falling behind in a race everyone else seems to be winning. She carried her own quiet burdens, visible in the careful way she moved and the guarded calm in her eyes, as if she had learned that life could take things away without warning. The problem revealed itself when the owner, apologetic and exhausted, explained that a booking error had left only one room available. There were no other hotels nearby, the roads were flooding, and leaving meant risking the night outside. The room was small, practical, and honest about its limitations, with walls that seemed to lean inward and a single bed placed at its center like a truth neither of us could avoid. She stated the obvious reality of the space with a firmness that suggested boundaries built from experience, and I answered with a nervous attempt at reassurance that was less about the bed and more about survival, about sharing what little comfort the night allowed. There was no romance in that moment, only the awkward awareness of proximity and the unspoken agreement that respect would matter more than convenience. As the door closed behind us, the silence became a character of its own. Rain drummed steadily against the window, and the dim yellow light revealed the exhaustion written on both our faces. I busied myself with small movements, placing my bag down, staring at the floor, pretending that the room was larger than it was. Inside, my thoughts were loud and unkind, reminding me of how far I felt from the life I once imagined. I had lost my job weeks earlier, a quiet dismissal that left no room for protest, and with it went my confidence and my sense of direction. I had told no one how scared I was, how each night felt longer than the last, how the future looked like a foggy road with no signs. Standing there, sharing space with a stranger, I felt exposed in a way that went deeper than physical closeness. Time moved slowly, measured by the ticking of an old clock somewhere in the building and the rise and fall of our breathing. We spoke little, choosing instead to exist alongside each other with cautious courtesy. Yet even without words, stories leaked into the room. I could sense her tension soften as minutes passed, the way she sat on the edge of the bed with her shoulders slowly lowering, the way her gaze drifted from the walls to the window as if searching for reassurance in the storm. In that shared quiet, something subtle began to shift. The room stopped feeling like a trap and started to feel like a pause, a brief intermission in lives that had been moving too fast and hurting too deeply. As the night deepened, the power flickered once, plunging us into darkness before returning with a tired hum. That brief blackout felt symbolic, a reminder of how fragile stability can be, and it stirred something in me. I realized how rarely I allowed myself to be vulnerable, how often I hid behind humor or silence to avoid admitting fear. Being there, stripped of distractions, I felt the weight of my own loneliness. I thought about the people who had drifted away when life became inconvenient, about promises that faded under pressure, about the quiet belief that maybe I was meant to face things alone. Yet the presence of another human being in that small room challenged that belief without saying a word. The bed became the center of an unspoken negotiation, not of space but of trust. We arranged ourselves with care, leaving room where room barely existed, respecting invisible lines drawn by mutual understanding. The mattress creaked softly, and the sheets smelled of detergent and something older, like memories embedded in fabric. I lay there staring at the ceiling, watching shadows move as cars passed outside, my mind replaying past mistakes and imagined futures. At the same time, I felt an unexpected calm, a sense that I was not entirely alone in my uncertainty. Her breathing, steady and real, grounded me in the present moment in a way I had not felt in a long time. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by thoughts and the occasional thunder rolling in the distance. In those half-dream states, memories surfaced of childhood nights when sharing a bed meant safety, not awkwardness, when closeness was natural and comforting. I woke at one point to the sound of rain easing, the storm finally losing its grip on the city. Dawn was still far away, but the darkness felt less heavy, as if the night had spent its fury and left behind something softer. I sensed her stirring too, a shared wakefulness that did not require explanation. Morning arrived quietly, with pale light slipping through the curtains and illuminating dust in the air like tiny stars. The room looked different in daylight, smaller but warmer, less intimidating. The storm had washed the city clean, and the silence that followed felt like a promise. We prepared to leave with the same politeness we had maintained all night, but there was something else now, an unspoken recognition that we had shared more than just space. We had shared a moment of trust in a world that often discourages it, a moment of kindness rooted in necessity but grown into something meaningful. As we stepped out into the fresh morning air, our paths diverged, but the impact of that night lingered. I walked away feeling lighter, not because my problems had vanished, but because I had been reminded of my capacity to connect, to respect, to offer and receive humanity even in uncomfortable situations. That single bed had held more than two tired bodies. It had held fear, hope, boundaries, and the quiet courage it takes to believe that there can be room for both understanding and vulnerability in our lives. In the days that followed, I noticed changes in myself. I spoke more honestly with people, admitted when I was struggling, and accepted help without shame. I approached opportunities with less bitterness and more openness, remembering that night as proof that not all unexpected situations end badly. Sometimes they teach us exactly what we need to learn. I never saw her again, but she remained a gentle presence in my memory, a reminder that kindness does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it simply shares the space it has and asks nothing in return. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of a moment when a stranger's presence made a difficult time easier, please take a moment now to like the video, share it with someone who might need encouragement, and subscribe to The Kindness Chronicles so more stories like this can continue to spread warmth and hope. And before this story ends, I have a special request for you. Go to the comments and write this line exactly as it is. The night cracked open like a storm without thunder, the kind that presses against the chest before the rain ever falls. And when she finally said she could not hold it in any more, and that she was coming out, the world seemed to tilt, as if gravity itself paused to listen. I remember the way the streetlight outside flickered, how the ceiling fan hummed like a tired witness, and how something ancient and fragile inside both of us broke free at the same time. In that instant, I understood that some truths are heavier than secrets, and some secrets are heavier than love. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and quiet courage, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who might need hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel The Kindness Chronicles so more stories like this can find the people who need them most. We had known each other since we were young enough to believe that the world was fair if you were patient and honest. We grew up under the same sky that taught us to keep our heads down and our hearts guarded, where tradition felt like a locked door and fear was the key everyone carried. She was the kind of person who laughed softly, as if afraid of taking up too much space, and I was the kind who listened too much, learning early that silence could be a shield. Our lives ran parallel for years, close enough to touch but never colliding, until the day her eyes held a storm she could no longer contain. The challenge did not arrive all at once. It crept in like a shadow stretching longer each evening. I noticed the weight she carried in the way she hesitated before smiling, the way she watched people instead of joining them, the way she flinched at careless jokes that cut deeper than anyone realized. She was fighting a war no one else could see, a battle between who she was and who the world demanded she be. I struggled too, caught between my instinct to protect and my fear of what protection might cost us both. In a place where whispers could ruin lives, love often learned to hide. Days turned into weeks, and the air around us thickened with unsaid words. I felt helpless watching her fade into herself, knowing that honesty was the medicine and the poison. When she finally reached the edge of herself, it was not dramatic in the way movies pretend. It was quiet, exhausted, and devastatingly human. The truth poured out not as a performance, but as a surrender. She was not asking for applause or permission. She was asking for air. And in that moment, I chose to become the space where she could breathe. Saying it would be our little secret was not about hiding her truth. It was about buying her time. Time to heal, time to stand stronger, time to choose her own moment. Yet that promise carried its own weight. Secrets demand vigilance, and vigilance can erode the soul. I learned what it meant to listen without fixing, to guard without controlling, to love without ownership. Every gathering became a test, every conversation a tightrope. I watched her smile through pain and wondered if silence was saving her or slowly drowning us both. The world outside did not soften just because our hearts had opened. Prejudice remained loud, ignorance careless, and danger real. I saw how easily kindness could turn into cruelty when difference appeared. My own struggle grew as I questioned my role, my courage, my limits. There were nights I lay awake imagining a future where she could walk freely, and mornings when fear convinced me that dreaming was reckless. Still, change has a way of beginning in the smallest places, and ours began with trust. As months passed, something subtle shifted. She started to stand taller, her laughter grew steadier, and her eyes carried less apology. The secret did not shrink her, it strengthened her. Watching that transformation taught me that truth, even when hidden, has a way of healing from the inside out. I learned that allyship is not loud declarations but consistent presence, not grand gestures but everyday loyalty. Together, we built a quiet sanctuary in a noisy world. The turning point came not with an announcement, but with a choice. She chose herself in a room where fear once ruled. She chose honesty in her own time, with her own voice. The aftermath was not easy. Some doors closed, some hearts resisted, and some nights were heavy with tears. But others opened unexpectedly. Compassion appeared where we least expected it, and love proved more resilient than hatred. I realized then that secrets are sometimes bridges, not prisons, and that coming out is not a single moment but a lifelong journey. By the end, the story was no longer about secrecy, but about courage rippling outward. Her truth inspired others to question their silence, to soften their judgments, to listen. It reminded me that protecting someone does not mean keeping them hidden forever, but walking beside them until they can walk on their own. The world did not change overnight, but a corner of it did, and that was enough to keep believing. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone you love or a truth you are still holding, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to the Kindness Chronicles so these stories can continue to light small fires of hope. And before you go, leave a comment line below with your thoughts, your prayers, or a simple message of support, because sometimes a few kind words are the courage someone else needs to finally breathe. The joke slipped out of my mouth at the exact moment my life cracked open, the kind of careless sentence that feels light when you say it, but lands heavy enough to rearrange everything that follows. It was raining outside the cafe, the sky the same dull gray as the disappointment hanging between us, and I laughed softly while saying I could pretend to be her boyfriend. I expected an eye roll, maybe a sarcastic smile. Instead, she looked at me with tired seriousness and said that pretending would require practice because no one would believe it otherwise. In that instant, something shifted, subtle and dangerous, like the quiet click of a door locking behind you. I didn't know it yet, but that joke would walk me straight into the deepest, most honest version of myself, and it would ask more from me than I had ever planned to give. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that small moments can change entire lives, take a second to like this video, comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel, The Kindness Chronicles, because stories like this only matter when they're shared and felt together. I had always been the reliable extra in other people's stories, the friend who showed up on time, the coworker who stayed late, the shoulder people leaned on when things fell apart. My own life, though, felt like a waiting room where nothing ever really happened. I worked a job that paid the bills but drained the color out of my days, ate dinners alone more often than I admitted, and told myself that stability was the same thing as happiness. She entered that routine quietly, not with fireworks or dramatic music, but with the exhausted grace of someone carrying too much for too long. We met through a mutual friend, bonded over shared sarcasm and the strange comfort of being honest with a near stranger. She was in the middle of family pressure that felt suffocating, expectations that pressed down on her chest every time the phone rang, questions about her life that she didn't have answers for yet. Somewhere between coffee refills and half-finished jokes, the idea formed, half serious and half desperate, that pretending might be easier than explaining. What started as a favor quickly grew complicated. At first, it was practical. Family events, social gatherings, the kind of spaces where being alone invited unwanted scrutiny. I told myself it was harmless, that I was helping someone I cared about, that there were rules and boundaries and an invisible line neither of us would cross. But pretending asks for details, and details ask for effort. We studied each other in quiet moments, learning habits, remembering preferences, building a story that felt convincing enough to survive questions. I noticed how she tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous, how her laughter changed when she forgot to be guarded. She noticed how I always stood slightly in front of her in crowds, not to show ownership, but protection. The more believable we became to others, the harder it was to remember what was real and what was borrowed. The challenge wasn't the pretending itself. It was the way it began to feel less like acting and more like revealing parts of ourselves we usually hid. I struggled with the fear that I was crossing an emotional line without permission, that my kindness was turning into attachment, that I was setting myself up for a fall I wouldn't be able to explain to anyone. There were nights I lay awake replaying moments, analyzing smiles, weighing gestures, wondering if I was imagining meaning where there was none. She struggled too, though she rarely said it outright. I could see it in the way her shoulders tensed before family gatherings, in the relief that washed over her face when I showed up, in the quiet gratitude that felt heavier than any spoken promise. As time passed, the stakes grew higher. People believed us. They saw the easy way we moved together, the unspoken understanding, the shared silence that only comes from comfort. Compliments and expectations followed, comments about the future, assumptions that felt too solid for something built on a joke. I felt a growing responsibility, not just to keep the story straight, but to protect her from the disappointment that would come if the truth ever surfaced. At the same time, I was confronting my own emptiness, realizing how much of my life had been lived at arm's length, safe but untouched. Pretending to be someone important to her made me confront how badly I wanted to be important to someone for real. The turning point didn't arrive with a dramatic confession or a single defining moment. It crept in slowly, during ordinary days that felt extraordinary only in hindsight. Grocery shopping together because it was easier than explaining why we were always in the same places. Sitting side by side in silence, comfortable enough not to fill the space with noise. Supporting each other through setbacks that had nothing to do with the act we were putting on. I found myself rooting for her dreams, worrying about her stress, celebrating her small victories as if they were my own. She began to rely on me not just as a shield from questions, but as a source of steadiness in a world that demanded too much from her. Still, fear lingered like a shadow. I was afraid that if I named what I felt, it would shatter what we had, that honesty would cost me the connection I had grown to cherish. She was afraid too, caught between gratitude and confusion, between the comfort of what we shared and the uncertainty of defining it. We were two people walking a narrow bridge, aware that one wrong step could send everything crashing down. The suspense wasn't about whether we would end up together, but whether we would have the courage to stop hiding behind the safety of pretending. Change came through vulnerability, the kind that doesn't announce itself, but demands to be acknowledged. When life threw unexpected challenges at both of us, moments that stripped away the performance and left only raw emotion, we showed up for each other without thinking about roles or expectations. In those moments, there was no audience to convince, no story to maintain, just two people choosing to stay. I realized then that kindness isn't passive, and love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to be present, to risk rejection for the chance at something real. By the time the pretending finally ended, it felt almost irrelevant to label what we had become. The journey had already changed us. I was no longer hiding in the background of my own life, and she was no longer carrying her burdens alone. We had learned that second chances don't always come wrapped in certainty, and that the bravest thing you can do is admit when something matters to you.